kids. And
we are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest this morning is John Harris from the Tennessee Firearms Association. We'll get phone number up on the screen if you want to join in the conversation. Gun violence, public health crisis, all of that we talk about. Is gun violence a public health crisis or that type of violence? How would you characterize or phrase it?
Oh, no, I do not think gun violence is public health. I think the propensity of a population segment to engage in violence unnecessarily
is a health crisis.
It potentially a mental health issue.
Okay.
Because some of it may be terrorists, some of it may be other stuff that's not necessarily mental health. Well, you could argue any terrorist is a mental health problem.
Something wrong there. Yeah,
but I think it's a heightened risk of violence within a population segment, and the gun's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Now that may be what they go for, but if you look at the data in Britain now, it's knives.
I know.
You know, so it's just the weapon of opportunity.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Is a rocket launcher a weapon of opportunity?
It's one you need.
We were just looking during the break about the different guns and weapons you can buy, and you can go online here, and there's you can buy a rocket launcher for $862. I guess there's some even more affordable than that. Now, I don't know what you have to go through to qualify to get one. I guess there's more of a permitting on that, but you can legally buy one of these.
Yes, you could. I mean, if it's demilled, you may have nothing to do. If it's functional, you may have to get a DD, a destructive device application in with the ATF, but you can acquire them. Okay, just like tanks.
Again, the issue on this, why we haven't seen, there's plenty of crazies out there that sometimes will go do things. They can't afford to buy one of these, is why. Or why have we not seen a disaster involving a rocket launcher with one of these kooks in this country?
Well, in time you likely will. I mean, terrorists are going to go to that with an airplane or a mass of people rather than a semi-auto.
And if you buy the launcher itself, is it hard sometimes to get the ammunition with it?
Extremely hard.
Is that the trick? The ammo sometimes more than the weapon itself. I didn't even think of that.
Well, it's like, for example, we've got a mutual friend that owns a tank in East Tennessee, and it's fully operational. You can drive it around. It shoots semi-auto, but the cannon, which is operational, can only be modified to shoot black powder percussion. It can't shoot live anti-personnel shells because he can't get them.
You just can't even get. I've seen him fire that. It's something else, though. I mean, it explodes in a cloud of chalk or something like that. We have a call from Jack here. Jack, good morning. Hi, Jack.
Good morning. I seem to recall something about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So life comes first, not guns. I am ex-Army infantry. I was in the NRA from the time I was a kid. I am an ex-NRA member because they turned my stomach. And a lot of the spurious arguments that we hear from the extreme gun rights advocates are ridiculous on their face. Absolutely ridiculous. And using the left as the boogeyman, using terrorism as a boogeyman. According to FBI statistics, more people died in America from right-wing, gun-toting terrorist attacks than from so-called terrorists. But we don't call them that because that's not how we have structured our laws. And I just get sick of it. Absolutely sick of it. And the absolute lack of flexibility in this argument, and I'm a gun owner. I'm not against the Second Amendment. I'm just tired of these clowns who come out sanctimoniously and declare that their rights are the only sacrosanct rights in our country. Straw man purchases should be outlawed. Gun background checks should be mandatory with some exceptions, i.e. family member transfers, et cetera, et cetera. But the kind of attitude that has come up around the right to carry a gun, and I own two, and feel free to call me someone on the left. And I'll call you what I think you are, but I'm going to refrain from that because I'm not playing the boogeyman game. I'm sick and tired of seeing my fellow citizens gunned down unnecessarily and with no recourse.
What he seems, and he said a lot of things there, and I'll let you respond, but the issue of flexibility, and I don't know if he was specifically referring to you or some at the NRA level where I think you'd have to agree there are some extremes on both sides on this. I mean, there are folks out there that would be happy, and I don't know if you'd be happy if anyone could just get a gun anytime, anywhere, nothing you have to jump through, just you could have it, take it anywhere you want with you, take it on a plane with you, I'm sorry, people like that are kooks. And on the other hand, people who would just assume, say, I wish I could snap my fingers and make guns disappear. No. So there's extremes on both ends, but it just doesn't seem like there's any compromise, or that some on the gun advocates are like, no matter what, even on some of these weapons, that maybe some prudent regulation could be applied, could help. Not even considered.
Well, no, it's not that it's not considered, because keep in mind, up until 1968. The world that he described, where anybody could buy a gun at any time and take it anywhere, it was almost what we had. And we got the 1968 Gun Control Act largely because of Kennedy's assassination and the ability at that time to mail order guns and take direct delivery of them. Mm-hmm. Which you can still do in this country, and in fact, the distributors, the federal government. It's a program called the Civilian Marksmanship Program. But we had that world, and then what happened is in '68 we started doing background checks to say you've got to go into a dealer to make a purchase of a new gun and have a background check, and that was because of the assassination, and things haven't gotten better. Mm-hmm. We had the assault weapons ban in the 90s from 94 to 2004 for 10 years, and the federal data that tracked did that have a positive effect on reducing gun violence, because we eliminated or made it harder for people to buy these weapons that were identified as assault weapons, actually misidentified, but that's the kinds of things you're talking about, the AR-15s, that people maybe don't have. And there's no data to show that in that 10-year test window that it reduced the risk that people are worried about or that are complaining about or attributing to guns. What we've not done is we've not had a window of time where we have focused taxpayer resources on that mental health component and tried to deal with it and reduce the risk to the public of mental health, either by treating them or in certain situations institutionalizing them if they just can't be trusted in society. Because like we said earlier, whether it's a gun or a knife, the risk is coming from the person's lack of control or willingness to engage in criminal violence.
Well, yeah, and there's no disputing that. To address them, it's multifaceted. It is. But the comparison, though, of a gun or knife, and you're right, in Europe we see some of this, and there have been stabbings, but gosh, very different types of weapons, and one is far more capable of doing substantially more damage, and there's simply no disputing that. An AK-47 or a knife, I'm going to kill a lot more people with that AK than a knife, and there's just no debating that. End of story. So please don't bother debating that.
That's why war today is fought with firearms.
Right, exactly, as opposed to knives. And so that's where the concern is. You see what happens in Las Vegas and all this. Yeah, that guy should never have been able to get the guns, and I wish we could have targeted him with some kind of red flag thing. But then, if he didn't have, I guess, the bump stocks, right? Things like that. Stocks. That's just
but the question
reasonable limits,
is had he crossed the line before he engaged in the Las Vegas shooting to the point that it was proper under our system of due process for the federal government to step in, because what we get back to is the Minority Report movie that we thought was fiction years ago.
That's right.
Is at what point can and should the government detain or infringe people based upon their predictions of what they might do?
Yeah, that's right. Now the case here with Travis Ranking, the Waffle House accused shooter here. I mean, remember the whole situation there now, supposedly with his family in Illinois, where he had gotten in some trouble, and some guns were taken from him. And I don't know how they thought this was a good idea, but they gave it to his dad. And then the dad, I think at some point, is accused of having given back the weapon to the son. And they thought it should be taken away from the son because of some of the issues he had. But somehow it wasn't really taken away.
Well, I mean, I think the evidence was that he would not have been disqualified in making a purchase. So it gets back to whether he got the gun from his dad or came down here and bought it.
He would have bought another one.
New.
Yeah.
The problem was not necessarily the gun. In all respects,
how he could get it.
It was what's wrong with him mentally
Right.
in his thought processes that predisposed him to engaging in that activity to start with.
And see, that's where, and I don't disagree at all with that. I mean, you're right. We've got to focus on that. But while we both probably would agree that it's an imperfect system, because we think about Minority Report, then you do the best you can to flag them. At the same time, maybe make it a little more difficult for them to purchase some of these weapons that can do just so much more damage. I mean, you wouldn't like to, because the Second Amendment, maybe you would say, protects it, but at the same time, we know there's not a perfect way to flag all these nutcases. So maybe we have to do a little bit on both sides.
Well, I mean, for example, if we use the Tennessee process of involuntary committals, that could flag them legitimately. You know, if doctors sign off and say the person's a real risk, because even under federal law since '68, a mental health order will preclude you from buying from a dealer. Now, it may not stop you from stealing one, but it would at least put some roadblocks up in terms of certain access points.
Gotcha. Let's take a few more phone calls here. We've got Cindy. Cindy, good morning. Hi, what's on your mind?
Hi, Nick.
Hey, Cindy.
I certainly don't want them to take our guns away and things. I believe that we have a honorable duty to be able to own one for protection at our home. Now, and we've lived in this house for the last 5 years. We bought, owned, and paid for it cash. And we didn't have a fence on a couple of sides. And so, anyway, we had a crime ring one time. I saw them, and then they ran, okay? But I told my cousin, and I distinctly watched the getaway vehicle. I've had 3 peeking Toms in the last 5 years, peeking in my bedroom.
That's awful.
And I mean, watching me while I'm sleeping. I jump up, there they are. I don't know how long, what they're doing there. Okay, but they're right up against my window, just staring. I don't know if they're going to come in my house, Nick. I'm a woman.
Sure.
What defense would I have?
Well, no, okay, but we hear this a lot of people. I don't want them taking our guns. No one, even the gun right advocates and the ones who are looking for more control, they're not the extremes. And I know there's some nuts on both sides, but no one's saying they're going to take Cindy's gun away or her right to defend herself. And, you know, that's a scare tactic there. Well, you know, they're going to try to pass this legislation, take our guns away. That's just a falsehood. It may take some or place some limits on certain weapons, but to say we're going to take the last person, Cindy has every right to have a gun to protect herself, and no one is going to take her gun away. It's just not going to happen. But then the paranoia is, they're going to start there, and then they're going to come take all of our guns. The paranoia among some folks is absurd.
There is.
Absurd that they're like going to come take all our guns. That's not happening. It's just not going to. There's no way it's going to happen in this country.
Those on the gun advocacy side, that government is a slippery slope.
Okay, it can go both ways. The slippery slope. Yeah. Like with the mental health thing, you got to be careful.
And where the gun advocates come back to is if you're going to get on the slippery slope, you have to do it within constitutional limits. And we may not like the fact, particularly those on the left, that the Constitution places limits on the choices that government has, but you got to deal with it. And if you don't like the limits, if the left doesn't like the limits, they have to go through the process of changing the constitutional parameters before they ignore them and just go straight to what they really want to do, which is to curb access or limit access to either categories of weapons or to certain individuals. You know, where we see, for example, now the argument of you're not old enough at 18, you need to be 21. Well, then it'll be you got to be 25. You know, it's that continuum of let's make it harder and harder for the population to have access. And if they're going to go there, I think they've got to go back first, and they got to deal with the Second Amendment's limits on government's options.
Okay, well, you know, and that's a very difficult thing to do, as you know, amending the Constitution in any way. But, so what's happening instead is you see some of these big stores deciding they're not going to sell them anymore.
True.
Which is entirely their right. It's entirely the right of consumers. So you're not selling guns, I'm not going to shop there anymore. But that's where it's going to be. Now, you'll always be able to find a place to buy guns. But, private business can make their choice. Second Amendment be damned.
Oh yeah, they do. I mean,
they can make their choice one way or the other, and then the consumer can make the choice. Well, then I'll go somewhere else. Of course, that's the American way, and that's what we've seen happen to some degree. Do you think that'll stick? Some of these stores that have done this at the outset, that have chosen not to either carry certain types of ammo or weapons. Do you think that's just a temporary thing, and they'll get back to selling them again, or do you think it's permanent decisions by some of these?
Some of them, I think, is permanent because of the philosophy of the people that are currently running those businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, I think, it may be temporal. They'll let the focus of the population or the popular debate wane, and then they may come back.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, Adrian and Tom and others, if you're on hold, stay there. More of our conversation with John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association, right after this.